Emily had always been a night owl, finding solace in the quiet hours when everyone else was asleep. One particular night, as the clock struck midnight, she sat at her desk engrossed in a novel. The lamp beside her flickered briefly, but she paid it no mind. The wind outside whispered through the trees, creating a gentle rustling sound. Suddenly, she heard a faint whisper behind her. Startled, she turned around, but the room was empty. Shrugging it off as her imagination, she returned to her book. Moments later, the whisper came again, this time clearer. "Emily!" Her heart raced. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. Silence answered. She stood up, scanning the room. Shadows danced on the walls as the lamp flickered once more. She decided to check the hallway. Stepping out, she found it shrouded in darkness. The house was eerily silent. As she walked down the corridor, the whispers grew louder, echoing her name from all directions. Panic set in. She tried to switch on the hallway light, but the switch did nothing. Her phone was back in her room. She felt isolated. The whispers turned into a chorus, a cacophony of voices chanting her name. She covered her ears, but the sound seemed to come from within her own head. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept past her, and the whispers stopped. Breathing heavily, she looked up to see a figure at the end of the hallway. It was a shadowy silhouette, unmoving, featureless, yet unmistakably staring at her. Fear paralyzed her. The figure raised an arm and beckoned her forward. Mustering her courage, Emily stepped back. The figure began to glide toward her, its movements unnatural and jerky. She turned and ran back to her room, slamming the door shut and locking it. The whispers resumed, louder and more insistent. She grabbed her phone and tried to call for help, but there was no signal. The doorknob rattled violently. Tears streamed down her face as she backed into a corner. The whispers crescendoed into a piercing scream. Then, everything went silent. The door slowly creaked open despite the lock. The figure stood there, its shadow stretching across the floor toward her. Emily couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The last thing she saw was the shadow enveloping her, cold darkness swallowing the light. The next morning, Emily's parents found her room empty. The only sign she had ever been there was her open book on the desk and the whisper of her name lingering in the air.